Hello to everyone listening to us right now. Welcome, good morning, good evening. My name is Bettina Borisch. I am the CEO of the World Federation of Public Health Associations, the voice of public health people, activists, advocates around the world. And we are since quite a time working together with the International Federation of Social Workers. When we were putting up this summit, I directly wanted to invite Remco van der Paas as a keynote speaker. Why? I have always been impressed by his very interesting research analysis, sharp thinking, and his excellent contributions. Remco van der Paas is a public health doctor, a global health researcher. He is at the Antwerp Institute of Tropical Health, but he is also since recently at the Center for Planetary Health that has been just recently established in Berlin. It is my great pleasure to announce Remco here, because reading Remco is already great, but listening to him is far better. So that's why I give the floor to Remco van der Paas. Please, Remco, it's your turn.
Thank you. Let me share the screen and let me go to the presentation that I prepared. That's quite a, oh, it's here. That's quite a an expectation that you raised, so I hope I could fulfill it in the time being here at at this important new Eco-Social World Summit, because there's a lot of questions ahead of us that we collaboratively need to work on. And the invitation for the talk that I prepared today is very much about the economic transformation and system transformation we require to deal with both social and ecological crisis, and what that would require for healthcare and cooperation. So this is an invitation to work on this together, and an input for further research activities, activism, etc. I have 3 questions for today. I will not be able to address them myself, but it's something we could take forward. I just want to provide some thoughts on why I came to these questions, or why they have become relevant also for the global health community that is somewhat, let's say, disconnected from the broader degrowth, new economics communities. And it's something that that we need to consider more in the global health scene as well, especially now post-COVID-19. So I start with a reference to Ivan Illich from the 70s. And the more I've read to it, the more I advance also in my career. I think that his writing was quite right, in a sense that we do not only produce health and improve medicine, etc., but we also produce externalities. There's all these side effects from our investments in, especially in biomedical healthcare. And so with health, and many people do not realize, but the healthcare industry is the second or largest economy, the second or third largest economy in the world. So it's big business, and so a lot of it is also being commodified and marketed in that regard. So with his thinking, and then going to the thinking from the 70s, from the original report of the limits to growth, where they talk about, so how, when we have development, economic development, how long is this sustainable? And that was already predicted by then, that there will be a limit to eventual growth because of the lack of resources, and because problems like food security, like population growth, like well-being, while they are interconnected, and what they call the predicament of mankind. And by doing that, that scenarios and looking at that in the 70s, and with references also where this economic trajectory is coming from, this growthism, coloniality thinking, etc., as most of the participants would agree with. So the question is, where are we now 50 years later on, and what would it mean for looking forward? The standard run model was this one, where they said, okay, at one moment, mid 20,000s, there will be a decline in economic growth as industrial output per capita, and we need to let's say we need to prepare for that, because it might mean that there might be implosion. And while that thinking has always been thought, it has always been thought that it was a bit of scaremongering, recent calculations said, well, actually they were quite right, these scientists. And the limits to growth consideration 50 years on, it's a very actual question. Are we willing to talk about that in public health and in global health practices? That is basically part of my key research agenda in the coming period, because there is something what is called the great acceleration. It's linked to this limits thinking, that we not only accelerate in let's say international financial investments, or in urbanization, or in even vaccine development, etc. But there's a lot of externalities, and these externalities are linked to ecological barriers. It's the biodiversity loss, it's ocean acidification, it's pollution by chemicals. It's the whole externalities that were not being accounted for in, let's say, in more conservative economic thinking. In conservative economic thinking, you look at the gross domestic product per country, and all the externalities in the other side of the globe, we just put it aside. They're not being imputed. But the ecological and social crisis we face now make that we cannot avoid them anymore, because it's so much linked to inequity. Our way of economic growth at the moment leads to not only the ecological damage, but also to inequities. It had not proven to solve the poverty questions that were already existing in the 70s. So the thesis is, we need to move away from growthism. It's the growth thinking and the mindset behind it that's part of the problem. So while the SDGs talk about inclusive, sustainable, and green growth, you see now more and more people, activists, academics talking about steady state economies, degrowth economies, etc. One of the main models being put forward there is the donut economic models from Kate Raworth. We need to respect our ecological ceiling and our social foundations. Growth is needed at the place where there is still carbon space, where social foundations in low-income countries are not met. So it's not against growth, but it's a bit of, she calls it herself a growth. In some places, a growth is needed. But this agenda also asks us really to look at reducing material output and reducing consumption and production, especially in the high income countries, to look at it from a systems and let's say circular perspectives, realizing that we are connected, we need each other for well-being. We are not a homo economicus that looks only for economic maximization. It's a bit of it's really a new way of seeing economics not as a goal, but as a mean for well-being. And she then talks about this overshooting of the boundaries, whether social or ecological. You can look at it from per country, but this is an aggregate figure. And this is her theory of change, that lower income countries should focus more on the social foundations part, higher income countries more on the ecological barriers. Can we come to a joint agenda there together? And this is quite different from what is now there in the SDGs, because the SDGs, in the end, it's about just expanding the cake based on an old model of economic development growth. Now, you see that slowly, partly due to the pandemics, more and more people start to talk about post-growth principles, how to build back differently, what would it mean for healthcare? And let me end with some examples there and the principles for this talk, and then see if there's any questions. It's also within the WHO, it's getting more and more recognized that we need to come to a different economics for health for all. But the principles are the following. If we, it's unavoidable that in wealthy nations, we need to downscale our energy and resource use. It's the idea that we can go through this crisis without doing this it's a fallacy. It means also that we need to think about another measure of economic well-being, much different than GDP, looking at two inequities, whether societies are connected, etc. Human want, human dignity, etc. It also means that it's a paradigmatic other way of thinking, that it's about thinking of an economy where people care about each other, where people can be creative, where they are autonomous, where there is sufficiency, and it's where there is less dependency of both the market and the state, but where societies can relate to each other and feel that they are able to create and sustain themselves. And in that sense, and that's where it comes to Ivan Illich, is where there is a different understanding of what health actually is, that it's not only an absence of disease that need to be treated, but it's very much a living in well-being and living in a healthy environment where you can prosper, where you can, let's say, develop oneself, and where also one recognizes the limitations of how long-lived and healthy one can be. There is an end to life, but that life needs to be lived in a sense of fulfillment. And that discussion, and that means also to have death closer to us, the issue of dying, and that eventually also death is something we cannot avoid and we need to give a place. This is quite crucial also to this understanding. It will be a discussion about what would it mean, what does a healthy community look like, and how do we care also for the older generation, the younger generation, and how can we do it in a way that we that it's also the home care that enables it, and the day-to-day life, and not so much that it's being outsourced to the state that then needs to take care, like in elderly care homes, etc. It also, so it talks about diversity, more pluriformity. We need to recognize that many have been talking about this also outside Western biomedical and social medicine approaches. In the end, it has a lot to do about justice, diversity, intersectionality. It's about redistribution of the resources that we have at the moment for the common, rather than for the few that have access to commodities. The degrowth community talks about an ethics of self-imposed limits in this regard. We need to deliberate about what can be expected and what cannot be expected from modern healthcare. Let me end with three examples, if that works. The first is from Germany. So the thinking is that because we don't have the resources, there might be transformations within healthcare systems. We might lack the physical means in the nearby future to provide, let's say, advanced technical care, because there will be limitations of where earth minerals. So there will be transformations, and we need to discuss what we can expect there. And it also means that we need to talk about reducing complexity, the complexity that exists now in the whole governance of bureaucratic health systems, and go much more to the basics. Primary healthcare, as in Alma Ata, with attentions to the determinants of health, and where there is much more people-centered and population-centered approaches at the community level, a cooperative health model. And a nice example is the Gesundheitskollektiv in Berlin that just started, which is about bringing communities together about a primary healthcare program, because that's often what people need: the attention, the social attention, and not necessarily the biomedical care per se. Then, and I saw that you also mentioned this in as a background to this summit. There are other medicine systems, healthcare systems that require attention. Eugenia Villar and René Leuwensen. So Eugenia Villar was the old head of department of the social determinants of health at WHO. So they made a very nice study where they said, well, look, there is social medicine, which is a little bit of the forerunner of the social determinants of health movement. But there are other very valid medicine systems that require attention and where we can learn from in the future. The whole Buen Vivir and Sumak Waisai, that has been addressed in the summit, the Ayurveda, Siddhi, and other systems from India, where there's much more connection with the, let's say, the cosmopolitan and spiritual world, where things need to be in balance, as well as Ubuntu and the relationships over there. We owe dependency to each other, so we need to respect the other while advancing our health. It's about limits. My freedom can only go so far as I don't hinder the limits of if I don't, I should not harm others while expanding my freedoms. And these thought systems or belief systems are very valid also when thinking about future healthcare. Lastly, without romanticizing, and everybody talks about local healthcare and community building, and we should localizing it, but there's also a global responsibility, shared responsibilities. People should not fall within the cracks, and this national social security, social contract thinking should be basically made coherent by a global social protection fund. This is where Olivier de Schutter and others, the old rapporteur on the right to food, has been argued for. Our international financial system should recognize that right to basic social assistance, social security, and it's not so difficult to implement financially if you would, via financial transaction tax or other international transaction measures, we could get there, even if we would use debt relief or cancellation for that. And that it has still not arrived, and that we still always fall back to the national state as our, let's say, our natural social security entry point. It's a bit of a fallacy. We can think beyond, and the question is how to get there. This is where such summits as this is important for. Let me end here. I think we are at this moment. It's a Gramscian moment. We are in between times. So let's look forward to the new that should still be born. These are still the questions. It's the same as in the beginning. These are my details. I leave it here, open for questions and debate.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Remco. I already received a question in the chat for you. Allow me to read it for you.
Yeah.
It goes the following. One of the debates of no growth movement is that it will affect the low income countries the worst. Do you think there is the option of changing the idea of growth, but growth of well-being and health, but not in harmful economic exploitation of people and ecosystems? What would you suggest as types of positive growth?
Yes, that's a very relevant question. I'm also a little bit cautious with the word degrowth and what kind of growth we're using. I tend to use the word post-growth and care and commons instead. We need to grow. We need to grow, regrow our connections. We need to within societies and with nature and the broader cosmopolitan spiritual world itself. We are disenchanted, so we need to get back to the stories and to the enchantment, what it means to live the good life. And luckily, many societies have frameworks for that, and without romanticizing it. But it's something we have unlearned in the West, so we need to relearn that. It's a spiritual that has left, let's say, the biomedicine debate, and we should be open for that. And so, and without also, in the end, it's also about political economy and about hard finance. We should invest in social health protection, in health workforce employment, in social health, in the insurances that people don't have a catastrophic health expenditure. So this is social health protection. That is possible, including in other, let's say, social well-being measures, while moving away from this more fossil fuel, commodified consumption, production growth thinking where we are. But it's very place bound. So what would mean growth in one place might really be different from another one. So I'm not against growth, but against growth from the right, for the right stuff, so to say.
Thank you. I already have a second question that is popping up. Medical practitioners, social workers, educators, and community members that work in communities often work together to address the social determinants of health. Are there places in the world where this is recognized and prioritized by the national health policies? Do you see this work as important as we move forward to changing the world?
Yes, there are many very good examples there. When I was in the younger phase of my life, I was very lucky to work in Coahuila, El Salvador. So this was in the phase after the wars in Central America, and they followed this model of primary healthcare and connection, and it was later picked up also by national health policies in El Salvador, and where they talk about social terms of health, right to health, etc. There are also in Latin America, there are several countries that have taken forward parts of social medicine movement, social determination movement. Bolivia, Ecuador. It's interesting what might now happen in Colombia, in Chile, because it's dependent on government and politics change. So it has been an uphill fight in many countries for those within ministries of health and social welfare to put this to the fore. Kerala is often used as an example from India, Costa Rica, Sri Lanka, from Ghana, Scandinavian countries. The examples are there. The question is how dominant they become, while in many international fora, there are other discourses, more the public-private discourses that are being pushed. So that's why it's so important that there are alternative fora like this one, where they can be given, where these examples can be provided.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as I am the chair, I allow myself a question, if I may. You mentioned the Club of Rome and Ivan Illich, both really, I think, founding books. My question that I have already asked others who work for One Health, Planetary Health, is why did the Club of Rome, that my parents explained me in the 80s, with a lot of, they were impressed. Why did nothing happen, or almost nothing? Why did we go as we went? And how could we avoid that the COVID awareness open window opportunity will always close again as the Club of Rome?
This is an interesting question, very important question. It's being talked about in several books. I like. I will stop sharing now so I can see other people. I like the thinking from Tim Jackson over there. He wrote about prosperity without growth, about post-growth and how we can advance there. Well, we traced that question also. It's not the standard answer will be, well, but this is neoliberalism and it's a capitalist expansion, etc. And we had the end of history after the fall of the Soviet Union. So there was a rollout of economic globalization. Here we go. There was a belief in technological advances and entrepreneurialism. So this is true. There's one layer below it, and that's we have fallen to a kind of a belief system. It's what Greta Thunberg called about in the 2019 UN General Assembly. It's all your fairy tales about economic growth. We have fallen into a myth. It's a belief system we're in. It's a belief system that we can expand and grow, and that accumulating a scarce, let's say, capital money, which is a construct, by accumulating that and by reinvesting that and by allowing it to be kept to private hands, that will help us out of the problems. So we need to then come up with another narrative. We should allow ourselves to come up with a different vision. And it starts really with allowing ourselves that our thinking is not colonized anymore. We should be free thinkers and think about that an alternative world is possible. And it's not only because ideologically I believe in that, but it's also because it is unavoidable. We're hitting the wall quite fast. So we better start believing about it, rather than that we rely on these myths and let's call it the American dream that were put forward in the 60s, in the 70s and 80s. But it goes one step back. It goes back also to the whole coloniality exploitation discussion that has happened during the last centuries, and where we have built our societies on. It was not win-win. There was always a losing end to it. Are we willing to take that seriously or not? That's my that's how I challenge people, and it's sometimes uncomfortable, but I think it's unavoidable to do that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much about your very personal thoughts. And I think this is a perfect way of closing after your keynote. Thanks again, Remco, for making the time and sharing your thoughts with all of us. Thank you to you. And now I'm back to the organizers. Thank you, Remco.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. My name is Luis Eugenio de Souza. I'm current president of the World Federation of Public Health Associations, and I'm chairing this live panel. I will share my screen to show you the main message I would like to send to you. I hope you can see it well. Yes, our live panel as the subject of economic drivers of an unequal world. And we have two panelists, Professor Bettina Borishi and Professor Carlos Oquer Reis. We are holding this session during the People Summit, a new eco-social world. As I said, I'm Luis Eugenio Souza, professor at the Collective Health Institute of Federal University of Bahia in Brazil, and president of the World Federation of Public Health Associations. We have two panelists, Professor Bettina Borishi. She is associate professor at the Institute of Global Health of the University of Geneva and executive director of the World Federation of and also Carlos Oquer Reis, who is technician of planning and research technician at the Institute of Applied Economics Research in Brazil. Our session will discuss the economic drivers of an unequal world, that structurally capitalism lives in an era of financial dominance. Financial or paper wealth, currencies, debt securities, shares on stock exchange, etc., multiplies relatively independently of the production and distribution of tangible assets, that is, of goods and services value in use. The COVID-19 pandemic provided striking examples of the voracity of financialization, even to the detriment of public health. While the global rollout of COVID-19 vaccines to protect everyone in the world would cost about $25 billion, government debt issuance in high-income countries only in 2020 reached nearly $18 trillion. No doubt, this is a system that is at the basis of an ever-increasing inequity in and among countries. The present panel will highlight that to preserve the health of people and the planet, we have to revise our incentives, and you have to learn how to counteract the prevailing economics. So, to begin our panel, our discussion, I'd like to invite Carlos Oquer Reis to make his presentation. Carlos, please.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Professor Souza. Hello, Professor Borish. My pleasure to be here today with you. My name is Carlos. I am an economist. As Professor Souza told you, I am a researcher of the Applied Economic Research Institute in Brazil. It's a kind of think tank of the Brazilian government. And I will try today to say you what I'm thinking, how to change the public health financing in this context of the financialization. Okay, I'm going to present my slides here. I'm going to upload my screen. Just a second, please. Luis Eugenio, I'm suppose I have 20 minutes or 30 minutes to present,
20
please.
minutes. Yes.
20 minutes. Okay. Okay. It's working out, the slides, please.
Yes, we can see it very well. If you can put it in the mode presentation, the mode presentation, please.
Oh, great. Just a second. Now it's fine, I think.
No, it's not in the presentation mode yet.
Really? Okay, just a second. What's going on? It's still.
But it's okay. We can read it.
Okay. What's the problem we have? The COVID pandemic provides striking examples of the voracity of financialization, even to the detriment of public health. And I will try here, actually, not, Bettina, to present solutions, actually, just to present some proposals that I will try to discuss addressing healthcare related issues. I'm not talking about environment issues, okay? So what's my outline? Are you following me, Luis Eugênio? I'm a little bit
Perfectly well, perfectly well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I will try to summarize the literature that has studied the link between finance and inequality. And this general context described how the Brazilian health system, like other public health care systems, played a central role in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. And I will try, as I told you, present a new fiscal framework that, in our opinion, would better equip policymakers to face deep uncertainties in healthcare area, recession, COVID, especially climate risks, especially concern pandemics and climate risks. So, two measures evolution of capitalism before and after the global financial crisis in 2008, for sure, is finalization and increase of inequalities. And it seems clear there is a relationship between them. On the one hand, finance has a growing hold on economic activity, both directly, as shown in its share of GDP, and indirectly by transforming the management of firms and the savings of households. On the other hand, inequalities in income, wealth, and even more wages increased sharply in almost all countries. After the crisis, the literature provides substantial evidence that the growth of financial activity led to more inequality and market societies in recent decades. The most obvious channel in that financial market activity, followed by an ongoing process of financial deregulation. I would like to emphasize this point, okay? Other channels, more indirect, also count as the growing submission of non-financial firms to shareholder value imperatives, increase within firm inequality, households' investments and financial securities, and moreover, their growing indebtedness. One obvious effect, in our opinion, of growing inequality is the constitution of a class of increasingly wealthy households which, unlike the middle class, whose wealth is primarily held in real estate, save primarily in the form of financial securities. But we also cannot put away the hypothesis of a reverse effect of inequalities provoked by the financialization, considering the strong growth in debt. Indebtedness can be viewed as a way of resolving or managing distributional conflicts between rich and poor, especially, another point I would like to call your attention, especially when no redistributive welfare state is ready to step in. Building bridge with literature on the role of finance in the developing countries could also help to measure the threshold where finances start becoming a course. For instance, Professor Boris, the Brazilian economy is now financialized, where the finances sector and its priorities have become increasingly dominant in all aspects of the economy, inclusively on healthcare for sure. The country has been facing extremely high levels of inequality. It is currently the 8th most unequal country in the world, and this process may affect income distribution and economic development. The process of financialization has served as an obstacle to reducing the income gap in Brazil by two means. Firstly, by promoting a shift away from investments in productive capital to those in financial investments and service, which is signaled by an inverse correlation between the rate of financialization of the Brazilian economy and the rate of fixed productive capital accumulation. And secondly, by altering the dynamics of social spending in the Brazilian welfare system through a recommodification process, the financialization at all. Brazil, I would like to describe very quickly some features of the Brazilian health system. Brazil was one of the first countries in Latin America to make access to healthcare as a constitutional right. Based on the principle that healthcare should be free at the point of use, the SUS, as we call here in Brazil, was created in the Brazilian Constitution in 1988, adopting the distribution model along the lines of the European welfare state. However, there is a contractual role assigned to healthcare in the Constitution, and it's very important to say that to you. On one hand, it allows for a free market, while on the other, it states that healthcare is a citizen right, an inconsistency which tends to overburden public financing, especially in the age of financialization. The Brazilian healthcare system combines public and private schemes that appear to be a duplicate model using the OECD classification, whereby the private health insurance provides coverage for services already offered in the SUS, in the public system. For-profit health insurance companies have grown on the back of public financial support by tax exemptions, mirroring the US liberal model, which is based on subsidies and employment benefits, as I learned with Professor Ted Marmor at Yale University. In general, the National Congress here in Brazil on key healthcare issues and avoid more wide-ranging negotiations between stakeholders to strengthen the public health system. In 1988 Constitution presumed there would be enough funding under the Social Security budget. However, recurrent underfund become the public system unable to both guarantee and improve universal coverage. So we have a kind of two-tiers health system here in Brazil. In this context, between 2020 and 2022, Brazil was faced with that would become a pandemic of enormous proportions and ensuing health as well as economic crisis. From China, the coronavirus and its related disease, SARS-CoV, took the world by storm. Each country dealt with the crisis more effectively or less chaotically, with more concern for its citizens or contempt for life. Under the governance, the current government of President Bolsonaro, Brazil unfortunately come to locate itself in the later category. Since the outbreak of pandemic, the public health system, the SUS, would play a central role in the fight against the pandemic, simply because the scientific and medical capabilities to face epidemiological events are concentrated predominantly in public institutions. However, Bolsonaro, the president, not only refused to fill his role, but also not encouraged the initiatives taken by the Congress. However, to face the pandemic, the government ended up approving the decree of public calamity, established a kind of war budget, and releasing fiscal resources, and thus financing health spending through debits. It's not consensus in the neoliberal ideas to do that, okay? From now on, in the opposite direction of the world, I am concluding my presentation, which has been applying expansionist fiscal policy. The aim is to impose, on the contrary, further cuts in spending that has a multiplying and redistributive effect, as is the case of the health policy, undermining the Brazilian state's ability to spend public investment and social spend. In short, despite the financialization, as observed in other countries, governments, and this is the idea I would like to share here with you, governments should seek to strategically organize the public budgets to face immediate challenges while taking initiatives oriented to post-pandemic world, either because of an unfavorable legacy that the pandemic will leave, or to protect against a new situation similar to the one we experience in the present. Since 2020, since the health crisis caused by COVID, economies of all lines have been forced, Professor Souza, to examine more than ever how economic and health policy can determine the causes of morbidity and mortality in a society. To enable the state to respond to the challenges of resumed growth and reduce inequality, several countries intend to increase public spend in the post-pandemic period. In addition, in several nations, fiscal rules have been suspended since the advent of pandemic. At theoretical and empirical levels, Brazil must align itself with international experience in the field of fiscal rules, moving towards a more flexible model that combines the finance of expenditures on healthcare. For example, where we grab this thought, Orszag Rubin and Professor Stiglitz propose an alternative framework to the adoption of rigid fiscal anchors top-down, which negatively impact the budget, especially in times of crisis. Among the main elements of this approach is please pay attention, the automatic adjustment to the long-term budget path of the main components of expenditures to the factors that condition it, especially for health. David Stuckler and Sanjay Basu, as you should know, made an important contribution in this regard. They published a book entitled The Bad Economic, Why Austerity Kills, before the pandemics, in which they criticize and demonstrate the negative effects of fiscal austerity policy on the living and health conditions of populations. Within these new fiscal standards, strategic expense would automatically adjust to their conditional factors in line with what was previously proposed, in which health expenditures would grow according to the structural facts of pressure on the public system in Brazil, the SUS. The key is that the budget has long-term stability, very important, long-term stability, mitigate the impact of pro-cyclical rules, and enable adequate finance of the public system. Concluding, Bettina and Luiz Eugênio, Brazil fiscal restrictions, actually, they are artificial and result from a vision inscribed in the current fiscal framework, whose rationale is to subtract capacity for state action. We need to strengthen the state. That's the point now in the crisis here in Brazil. In other words, the current limits are not strictly financial, but political and ideological. Actually, we have resource to fight this crisis. For this reason, concluding, it's urgent to overcome then proposing a new conception of fiscal regime able to finance the public health and healthcare area demanded by the population. I really appreciate your attention on my presentation. I would like to discuss with you these ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for your excellent presentation. We have already questions to you, but we'll keep it for the end of the session, so for the last minutes of the session. So now I'd like to invite our friend and colleague, Professor Boris, to her presentation. Please, Bettina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much for having me. And let me also upload my PowerPoint as it should be done.
Not yet.
Not yet, no, not yet, but very soon. So I hope you see it.
I can't.
Yes, everyone?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, so. Sorry.
Unfortunately not, Bettina.
Huh?
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, I'll. So I give it a second try. That's never happened to me, but it has to happen once. Once after 2 years of. Okay, so last try now.
Would you like to share your presentation?
And now it's done. Here we have it. I think here you have it.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Now it's okay. Perfect.
So sorry for this.
No problem.
And I would like to thank Carlos very much, because what I think is something we miss as health people and public health people. We are not at all trained in economy, and we should be. Remco already said that health is a big business. And in Switzerland, I am in a country where health care industry is 33% of GDP of the country. So really, this is important. But how dare I to talk about Switzerland when we have heard about Brazil and the problems that Brazil has been facing with a very interesting president and a government that was really probably not apt to work for the COVID-struck population. How dare I? The Gini index of Switzerland is 30. I just checked, Brazil is 48. So definitely there is more inequity in Brazil. We in Switzerland are at the same level as Albania, for example. But I would like to dare to talk about Switzerland, not only because the World Federation is headquartered here, and we also have to look at our direct environment and not only directly into the world. We live, if you talk to someone, oh, you're in Switzerland, it's this beautiful country with mountains and cows and chocolate and banks and a lot of bank accounts and a lot of rich people. Indeed, Switzerland is a high income country. And it also has, in terms of health, a very high level of life expectancy. In fact, it is almost as high as Japan. So really leading in life expectancy. And I wanted to become very practical and explain how inequity can be built everywhere, even in the richest places. So our healthcare system is also known to be very good. People travel to be taken care of in Switzerland, come into Switzerland for healthcare. We do spend quite a lot of money, as you see here. We are among the second most expensive, US always being the far expensive if it comes in percentage of GDP. But okay, US is always an outlier. Now, because I want to show you point by point how inequity can be built, you have to know in a nutshell what the Swiss healthcare system looks like. Sorry for that. There is no such thing like an NHS in the UK. There is no free state provided health service paid by the taxes, but we have private insurance companies like in Germany. And they are compulsory for all persons that live in Switzerland. And the premiums that we have to pay, they are independent from our income. So everyone pays the same. And those who are not able to pay, they can get subsidies from the state, the canton. And this holds true for 30% of citizens in Switzerland. They cannot pay their insurance premiums. But in addition to the premiums we pay, insured persons have to pay the cost of the treatment with an annual flat deductible. We call it franchise. So you choose if you will not pay your health expenditures between 300 or 2,500, and only if it goes over 2,500, then you start to get something reimbursed before you pay it yourself. And you pay also when then you get something from the insurance back, you pay 10% deductible of the costs. Very interesting also, and completely different to all other healthcare systems around Switzerland. Dental care, oral health is not at all paid for by any insurance, basic insurance. You have to pay cash down on the counter for the lack of the dentists, yes. And as we see in other countries, the healthcare costs increase. They have been increasing by 55% in the 10 years from 1999 to 2009. And from then on, every year, we have an increase between 2 to 5 to sometimes 8%. So that means every citizen, even though he has a compulsory insurance, pays quite a lot out of his pocket, so cash down on the counter. You see here Switzerland, it's about over 33% that you pay out of pocket as a Swiss citizen, as compared to other European countries. It's around 10% here in the UK or in Denmark or other places. So we pay a lot. Then comes a problem. No, not the problem. The beauty of Switzerland, we don't have one healthcare system. We have 26, because we have 26 cantons and they have 26 health ministers and health systems. And there are also, in terms of financing, a lot of differences. Per canton, you can have different insurance premiums. If you have the same insurance company, I would move from, let's say, here in Geneva to the canton of Zurich, I would have to pay another premium, even with the same insurance and the same insurance model. And every canton can decide if he pays and how much subsidies to how many people. So wherever you live, it depends. If you are in a canton that is very much taking care of poor people, then you may have a help for your premiums. If you're in a canton that does not like to take care of poor people, you will not have a help. Unfortunately, we also have important differences in health cantons outcomes between the cantons. For example, breast cancer specific mortality can have differences of up to 25% from one canton to another one. And put it very pragmatically, an average, the same family, parents to children, a normal revenue of 70,000 Swiss francs, has to devote 4% of its income if they live in Obwald, a German-speaking canton, but over 60% if they live in Canton Vaud, which is our neighbor canton. Now, this has to be looked at in more detail, and our colleagues from the hospital here have a very beautiful clinical cohort of the population in Geneva. They do it with this Bus Santé and several places around the city. So they follow up a large cohort of Geneva citizens for a lot of health indicators and measure them regularly. What they did was, being in this rich, we are ranking third most expensive city in the world now. In this rich place, the question is, are there Swiss citizens that have to renunciate for economic reasons for any healthcare? Do they say, I cannot go for this health care because I have no money? And they asked the question to their participants of the cohort. The question was, during the previous 12 months, have you renounced to health care services for economic reasons? And if so, please, what type of health care? So the results were that 50% of participants have renounced any health service for economical reasons during the last year. So this is quite an important part of the population. If you ask them what were the main health services, for sure, in a country where you have to pay cash, all dental care comes first, dental care. But even if they took out dental care, there was still a lot of medical consultations and other services that they didn't took because they felt they didn't have the money. So what income groups renounced the most? Here you see the low income groups on the left hand, less than 3,000 Swiss francs, and the high income groups on this side, over 13,000 Swiss francs per month. This may sound a lot, but again, Geneva is the third most expensive city in the world. With 3,000 per month, you can make it almost not. We see here that the low income people have obviously renounced the most, whereas the richer ones, and the richer they become, they don't renounce for healthcare. Now you may say that's good. If these people in good health, they may have a year without seeing a doctor, a dentist, or a hygienist, or a physiotherapist. Okay, but the case was that in this group, especially the people of low income group who did renounce the most, have the highest amount of risk factors and cardiovascular comorbidity. So in fact, they would have been the ones that should have seen doctors, almost 70% of risk factors, whereas those who renounced had less, the richer, high level income less. So in fact, this is a very clear demonstration of the social gradient that we know so well. So patients with the lowest income renounced to healthcare 9 times more frequently than those with high incomes. And further, those with the lowest income presented with the highest burden in terms of cardiovascular disease or risk factors. So what I would like to show here, that there is inequity in the way how the Swiss health system financing goes. And the inequities are built into the system. They are part of the system. The system even penalizes the already disadvantaged. And this, in a certain way, is a downward spiral that is put in place. And at the beginning, I showed you these positive results, the good performance of the Swiss healthcare system with producing the highest, a very high life expectancy. But the good average performance of the Swiss healthcare system may mask important variabilities between population groups and or regions, as we see with the cantons. And some of these differences may be really potentially unfair and create problems. So I think that our task as health people and public health people is to uncover those kind of masked producers of inequity wherever they exist. And they may exist, as you have seen, in a quite nice looking system. I could be asked, okay, this was a study of 21, the 29 ended in 29, but now we are some 10 years later. And I can tell you that another colleague did a new study, and this was done 21. So again, we see here that low income groups, the yellow ones, they renounce or forego at most for healthcare as compared to high income groups. And this is also the case for everything that you have to pay because you have this deductible. And because you have this deductible, you will renounce to healthcare. That was what they looked at. And again, the renouncing is the highest in the poorest, in the first tertile, and less in the richer ones. So this has not changed at all. It has almost increased and is about to increase with COVID. So let me conclude. Switzerland is a high income country with a good healthcare system. The way every system is financed, is organized, determines how citizens access healthcare. The system here in place favors pre-existing inequity to persist and produces even higher levels of inequity. Inequity exists and may be enforced even in high income settings, but I think just by showing this mechanism, you may have an eye opener to look at them in other settings as well. and see perhaps if it happens as well in low and middle income countries. And I think it is definitely our finest duty to learn how to counteract this prevailing economic drivers of health inequity and inequity in general with that. And as I started with a beautiful picture of the Swiss mountains, and we were talking about this image that a lot of people, foreigners, have when they think of Switzerland. Everything goes well, the country is rich, the people are happy, they live long, the cows give good milk. I will conclude and finish with a picture that is not so well known for Switzerland. This here is a picture that showed people queuing hours and hours for free food and basic necessities. That was taken in Geneva in 2020. We were in the hard part of COVID, and suddenly the poor people, or the ones that only make it with a lot of effort, were visible. Let us have our eyes open on all these invisible mechanisms and invisible people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bettina, Professor Borisch. Very interesting presentation, excellent presentation that gives a complete, a real picture of Switzerland and its health system, and how inequity is built into the health system. Probably the option for a private health insurance, even compulsory, is linked to the financial system. That is a big market for the financial system. So here we get a very, very lively example of the economic drivers of an unequal world, in this case, an unequal country. Thank you very much. We have already some questions in the chat. I'd like to thank you all people in the audience that are making questions. So I would like to go back to Carlos. We have the two questions, I think, direct to the situation in Brazil. So I would kindly ask Bettina to stop sharing the screen, and Carlos, I will read the question that is in the chat. So in Brazil, did you see a decrease in public health when the Bolsa Familia program, it's a conditional cash transfer program from the federal government, was introduced? If so, what were the main changes as a result of this policy? I mean, the impact of the Bolsa Familia, this conditional cash transfer program, in the public health. Please, Carlos.
Actually, the life conditions got better, and the outcomes related to healthcare improved. No magic. The living conditions got better, improved. To poor people, especially. So we could observe improvements in this area. Of course, there is an important program related to concerning primary care in Brazil, and we could say that I think it's what is the best probably in the public health system in Brazil, a estratégia de saúde da família. It's a program to cover servers in primary care that are very efficient. So I would say, Luiz Eugênio, that not actually Bolsa Familia had impacted the public, the health conditions directly, but indirectly, it's this combination were perfect. That's that I would say.
Thank you very much. Yes, the Bolsa Familia program, we have a lot of studies showing the important impact in the reduction of infant mortality and also in the morbidity. Several diseases were better treated and better. The situation got better with people who received the money from the Bolsa Familia program. It's a very successful program, and we are a little sad that it ended in the current government, but hopefully we'll get it back soon. The second question, I think it's addressed both to Carlos and Bettina. So the speakers have highlighted many of the challenges we face. Do they think that the health professions have contributed to the inequalities spoken about? If so, what changes do the health professions need to make? I will maybe ask Bettina to answer first this question, and after I ask to Carlos to say his thoughts about the role of the health professions. Even Carlos is not a health professional, he's an economist, but he has a PhD in public health, so he would be able to say his thinking also. Please, Bettina.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different health professionals, and as I said at the beginning of my presentation, I think one of the problems is that when you become trained as a health professional, there is very little training in the economical model that you will be dumped into then later on. So it took me and took myself a long time to understand and to talk to people who know more about health economics to get this vision. And once you have it, and you have to take up action, because I would like to come back also to Remco. It is what we are doing in health for the moment is bad to our environment. It's mostly not what our people want and need. We are not having health care systems, but we have disease management systems. It is just a fake to call them healthcare systems. Most of them don't take care of health, but they manage disease. And the more severe the disease, the better it is, because it creates more money and more income. Best thing is always to have a bad cancer, because then you can get really expensive drugs. I'm exaggerating. But once you have understood, and once you are part of people who do health care because they care for people and not for income, then I think this group of people, we have to come together, we have to unite, and we have to look at how we can get that done. And I also would like to say, like Remco, it is one of our problems that the system, that we still have this old nation state. It limits us a lot. In the EU, you start to have cross-border healthcare, but still everything is nation state. And the nation state is a disaster because it's a 19th century invention, and the healthcare systems were created, the first ones, inside nation states. But if we all have, together with economists, with other open-minded people, understood the mechanisms, and that we are really doctors that care for people and our environment, because only with the environment we can live, then I think we have to take up action. And who else should do? Because as usually, doctors are more credible than journalists and politicians. So we have to speak up. We are credible for the public. So it's our finest task. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bettina. Carlos, would you like to say something about the role of...
I think Professor Bettina has already pointed out what I would like to emphasize regarding the trade-off between the physician income, for instance, and the necessity of provide care in a better way to the citizens. This kind of trade-off can somehow produce inequalities as long as the physicians or other health professionals acting not looking for people, for the poor people, but acting, trying to have more money. That's the point. Actually, in the financialization contest, healthcare, as told our colleague before, has become more and more business. So that's the point that I think that Bettina has already pointed out.
Thank you, Carlos. I would quickly add that health professions, as Bettina said, we have all different people being health professionals, and they are different class of people. We have we have rich health professionals that wish to serve the rich classes, the wealthy classes, and we have in Brazil we have a very important movement of popular doctors, popular physicians. There are people from the popular class that serves the popular class. They are not the same elite professionals that serves the elite. Bettina, please.
If I may add, yes, I think that the link to social work, because we are here with the international, is very close. If you think of the Aishas in India or the community health nurses and the tasks, and I think that Alma Ata was really good. We have to see as getting everyone working in the field of health, social well-being come together again, and that we get this class society that we have created among health professionals, and that this class society be avoided, because among even medical society, this creates wars for incomes, and this is extremely bad. I think that together with social work, the social system, health systems, people who are in that and who are caring of it, because there are other places around, we have to try to get it again a little bit more one group of, and not these differences that you mentioned, Luis, together with really, like, you know, there are examples in Brazil, in India, but they have to be implemented in high income countries too. And this will be quite a political move, I tell you.
Yeah, thank you. We have two more questions. I will read both, and you please, Carlos, I'll begin with Carlos, and Bettina, you can comment both. I think they are closely related. Other speakers have spoken about the need to focus or balance public spending on prevention rather than only on treatments. Can private and public healthcare work side by side, having conversations about this? The second question, across the world, are different health insurance or state systems? Which ones create the best outcomes? So the balance between prevention and treatments, public healthcare, private healthcare, and different health insurance structures, schemes. Carlos, please.
At least in Brazil, it's not a good idea put together the private and the public sectors try to produce service in the prevention or in primary care sector, okay? I would like to be very clear here with you. The private sector in the primary care try to privatize the service, and there are negative effects in the healthcare outcomes and actually in the level of public resource to the health public system, Bettina, and this way producing more inequality. Okay, so please, at least in Brazil, in the South America, this kind of public-private mix doesn't work at all, definitely, okay? And second, Luis Eugenio, Professor, I'm really sorry, but I'm not following anymore this kind of data regarding the public health comparisons across the world, okay? But I would bet, please, Bettina, let me know if I am wrong here, if I got wrong here. I think that Canada and even Germany maybe they are present the best, I think, outcomes, but actually I'm not following anymore this kind of data. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right, Carlos. There is a lot of research about healthcare systems evaluation and ranking. You know that the WHO once tried to rank healthcare systems and they got so attacked that they will never do it again. I think one problem with evaluating healthcare systems is that we already start then to talk about the economics and the effectiveness and efficiency. I would like to separate that and say, what are healthcare systems that are really health and not disease management systems that integrate really health? And I have been researching as a researcher a lot of healthcare systems, countries like Panama and Taiwan. And I think there are elements in some places that are really interesting examples to follow. But for me, the most important indicator would be how much equity do the systems deliver. And then only I would come with how much money is put into it. Because look at the US, that is the most expensive one and does just not deliver equity, but the contrary. So if I could, I would measure healthcare systems in terms of equity. And where I have seen for the question of public-private, I know that in Switzerland, everyone is absolutely fascinated by private health insurance companies. We have over 60 in a country for 8 million, and they say that the market will make it. But if you have to change every year between change your health insurance and look which is the best around 60s, you just simply don't do it. The market in health is another question. And I think it's not true that public-private always delivers good results. I have only one system, but you have to regulate the private sector in a very strict way. I have seen that in Taiwan with one unique insurance company for 23 million people and very harsh regulations, you make private practicing doctors behave correctly, I would say. But this is an exceptional system. Yes. I haven't found it back, and it cannot be produced anywhere. So like Carlos, I say, I'm always a little bit doubtful when someone explains me that we definitely need the market in healthcare. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Bettina. Thank you very much, Carlos. I would like to profit from this last minute we have just to show to our audience, to make an invitation, actually. The World Federation will be held in next year in May 2023, from 2 to 6 of May in Rome, Italy, our 17th World Congress on Public Health that has this general theme, a world in turmoil, opportunity to focus on the public's health. On next September, we will be opening for the submission of abstracts. And since now, registrations are already open. So please join us in Rome in 2023 to continue all these discussions. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you all for the audience. And I think we reached the limit of our time. It was a wonderful talk. Thank you very much to Carlos, to Bettina, and hope you see you all also in this continuity of the People's Summit today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. We have a lot of good discussions. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
I'm really sorry I couldn't follow on the YouTube. It was
Well done, Luis.
bye-bye.
I left you 1 minute for the Congress. That was very well. Bye.